Welcome, everybody, to day 8, January 12th. It's a Monday. If you're reading on time, great to have you back again for the Bible read. So, we're in Mark 6, as we said. Jesus is coming back to his own area of Nazareth, his own city of Nazareth. All these people, they know him already. They've been amazed at the miracles they've heard about. They're even amazed at his teachings there. They're kind of taken away, and then they go, wait a minute, this is that same Jesus we know, the son of Joseph and Mary, and he, how can this possibly be happening? And their faith began to go down. And so it says that he could there do no mighty works, save that he healed a few people. And then it goes on in verse 6 to say that he marveled at their unbelief. Now we know that Jesus at times marveled at people's faith. He marveled at the faith of the centurion. He marveled at the faith of the woman, the Gentile woman who wanted her child healed. So he marveled sometimes at faith, but here he marveled at unbelief. I'd like to make sure that when Jesus marvels at me, it's about faith. What's interesting here is that Jesus underperformed. It says he could only heal a few sick people here. He sort of underperformed because he normally would be healing people all over the place, and he could only do a few. But why? It says, because of their unbelief. Let's not ever let our unbelief be a hindrance to God doing mighty miracles around us. And then he goes into the 12. He sends the 12 out. He gives them authority over unclean spirits in verse 7. And he commanded them what provisions they should take. And it says that they went about and they preached and they cast out many devils and anointed with oil those that were sick, and they healed them. Now, there are people who believe that the apostles, they needed that, but for some reason we don't necessarily need that. I would think that if they needed it in that day, certainly in this day, we need it, and God is certainly willing to do it. So the commission that was given to the apostles is also a commission given to us. It's why we don't fear evil spirits, they fear us. We don't fear sickness and disease, it should run from us. And so that you can see an interaction here between Jesus and the faith that people had in Jesus, making a difference in the outcome all around them. And so we go through the whole story. We'll probably cover this in one of the other Gospels a little more extensively, but Herod is confused about who Jesus is, and he's asking about him, and then his wife's daughter does a dance and asks to have John the Baptist's head cut off, and he cuts off the head, and it's the end of John the Baptist there. But let's go into this feeding of the 5,000 that starts in verse 30. And he brought all these people way out to a place where there was no food so he could teach them. And when Jesus saw them, he was moved because he saw them like a sheep without shepherd. And every person needs a shepherd. We all need a shepherd. Well, we know the Lord is our shepherd. We shall not want. On the earth, there's also spiritual leaders that can be called shepherds. And so he had great compassion on them. And as the day went on, the disciples said, hey, all these people, they're really hungry. And what are we going to do? Would you like us to go into the city and buy some food? And Jesus, he said, you give them to eat. Now, this is an amazing thing because they really didn't have anything to give, and yet Jesus asked them to give what they did not have. I think that Jesus is notorious for asking people to do things that they cannot do with resources they do not have. Think about Peter when he asked him to walk out on the water. Peter couldn't walk on the water, but Jesus still asked him to come. Here he's asking them to feed all these people. What did that look like? Well, they said, well, we really don't have very much to do it with. And Jesus said, how many loaves do you have? And when they knew, they said, we have 5 loaves and 2 fishes for all those people. And he commanded them to sit down in companies on the grass. And it's kind of interesting what happened here. It says that Jesus, when he had taken the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, he looked up into heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to his disciples and set them, and the two fishes divided them. He set them, and the two fishes divided he among them. And so all of his disciples, he gave those fish and the loaves to them, and he said, you go feed all these people. This would have to make you wonder, where do we start? Do we ration? Do we have to be careful? How will there ever be enough? And as they handed it out, of course, more and more came, and they fed all of them. It says there's about 5,000 men, so there's probably about 15,000 people that his disciples fed. Who fed them? His disciples fed them. Jesus blessed it. Jesus blessed what wasn't enough, and it became enough. They didn't complain about what wasn't enough. Jesus didn't complain. Jesus didn't look into heaven and say, how am I going to feed all these people with this little bit of food that I had? He blessed it. He thanked God for it. And God turned what wasn't enough into enough. And so this is something that we should always be thinking of. If you feel like you don't have enough, thank God for what you have. And watch him turn it into enough for whatever it is that he's called you to. So here we have Jesus walking on the water. What happens? Straightway he constrained his disciples after everybody was fed, and he sent them on across the river. And he said, I want you guys to the sea. I want you to meet me on the other side to Bethesda. And he sent them away. And then he went to a mountain, and he prayed. And here came another wind. Now, we already saw this back in Mark 4 or so, where there was a terrible storm, and Jesus came up, and he was like, how is it that you have no faith? Remember? They were all afraid. Well, here we have scared fishermen in a boat again. And so they saw Jesus walking on the water as if he would have passed them. And it's kind of an interesting thought. Why would Jesus had passed them? Well, he told them, go to the other side. The place where Jesus commanded them to go is where he went to meet them. So he was planning on going there and waiting for them. The storm didn't make a difference to Jesus. He had told them what to do. But as he was passing them, as he would have passed them, all of a sudden they saw him and they thought, it's a ghost. And they started screaming. And then he looked over and he saw them, and immediately he talked with them, and he said to them, be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. So I'm going to go right back to that very first time in the boat when Jesus was asleep, and he said, don't be afraid, be of good cheer. You might want to present the facts and say, but our boat is about to sink. Isn't that a good time to be afraid? It's like I told somebody when we went on a missions trip one time. I said, if you don't see me freaking out, there's no need for you to freak out, because we're going to be okay. And so here we have Jesus saying, don't be afraid. And it says in verse 52 something very interesting. It says, for they considered not the miracle of the loaves because their hearts were hardened. Why would they need to think about the loaves while their boat was getting ready to sink? And it's really simple. If you can believe God for a miracle of provision, you can believe God for just about anything. Because provision is one of the daily things that we think about. And so when you're asking God for your daily bread, you're believing God for your daily bread, you're believing God for your provisions, it builds your faith, and then you can believe for things like raging seas. So you can see where Jesus is still encouraging them to, come on and use your faith. Don't be afraid. I'd encourage you to use your faith. Don't be afraid. And then Jesus goes on to Gennesaret. And he goes over to this area and he starts healing people. Unlike back in Nazareth of his own town, there's a great deal of faith there. People are rushing and bringing sick people. And it says in the very last verse, 56, that wherever they entered, the villages, cities, the sick were laid. The sick were laid in the streets, and he besought them that he might touch them. And it says they touched the border of his garment, and as many as touched him were made whole. As many as touched him were made whole. What that tells me is there were people who were so full of faith that just like that woman we talked about so recently who touched the hem of his garment, these people were coming with an unction of faith, a contact point for their faith, a place for their miracle to happen. They reached out and they came to Jesus and they touched him. So the point is, how you believe and what you believe makes a big difference in the miracles you receive in your life. And I just pray that as we read through the book of Mark and we see all these miracles, it'll bring us to a new level of understanding of what God has in store for us. We'll see you tomorrow morning.